Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Prof.
Good evening, Prof.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Prof.
Good evening, Dan. Okay, so we wait a little bit for until 5 past. That's another 2 minutes.
Great.
Evening,
I think
everybody.
that's a good idea.
Well, I think we should start, and I'm just gonna start with the word of prayer. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Professor Mostert. Thank you for another session that is going to open our eyes to the transitioning into business people, entrepreneurs. And I just want to start with the scripture from Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, that says, "My people are being destroyed from a lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I also reject you as my priests, my representatives. Because you have ignored the law of your God, I will ignore your children." Let us bow our heads in prayer and thank God for the opportunity to gather and to reflect and to share knowledge. Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for the opportunity. We ask that you give us revelation knowledge that will reach deep into our souls and connect us back to the light, the truth, and the way. In the mighty name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
With these words, I would like to then hand over to the drivers of the program, and we'll just be listening and taking notes in the background. Pen and paper ready.
put in first pieces have you added onto slide?
Okay, good evening, everybody. So we have been trying to do two things in parallel. On the one hand, we're trying to see what is required to have a business. And I'm sure there are many of you that can tell me more about that than I can tell you, but nevertheless, I've been working with this Wired for Business framework, and next week we'll have Lutando Maliu joining me. He's currently on a 2-week training course to get more immersed into this methodology of work for a living and wired for business. And in parallel, we are looking at the context in which we are executing business from a systems worldview perspective. So I think we should start with just reviewing what we have learned on the systems worldview side. And because it talks to the question of needs, and having a business is about addressing people's needs at the end of the day. So the first thing that we took note of, and I just want to get to my Zoom meeting so I can share. Okay. So the first thing that we took note of was the fact that for the most part, we jump to conclusions extremely quickly. And this is the ladder of inference. Is we can see this, you can see this guy here, he can only see the circles, but there's triangles and squares. So everything is happening in the soup of reality, but he can only select the circles. So he adds cultural meaning, makes some assumptions, draw a map that with which he can model reality. And then based on, I'm just wondering how I get this thing out of the way. And then based on the map, he takes decisions. And because he can only see what he believes, you can only see the circles there. Okay, so I have one reality in my world. I need to listen to the doorbell because everybody is away tonight and I'm working for my wife. So just please give me 2 minutes to go and check in somebody. Is that okay?
Yes, that's okay.
Prof. We'll wait for
Yes,
you.
it's absolutely okay.
Violet, you may want to attend this one. You may want to attend this one.
Okay, I'm back. It is quite interesting. It's the Cape Epic this coming weekend, and there are people from Colombia in South America taking part in the Cape Epic. They flew all the way here from Colombia. Anyway. So the problem with this ladder of inference is it happens in a split second. Okay? If you see somebody lying next to the road, you immediately either think they have sympathy with them, or you think, what are these people doing here? And you can be, if you're a nurse, you would think, so did the person get hurt? Can I help the person? If you are a policeman, you can think what anything. If you're a businessman that is on his way to an important meeting, you might not even see the lady lying next to the road. So it's exactly the same evidence, but people see what they believe. Okay, and the problem is that this ladder you can only build yourself. So you don't know what is the ladder in somebody else's head. You can only make a deduction once you see behavior that you don't understand. Okay. So every one of us has a different view on the same soup of evidence. So we looked at three of the words that we hear quite often, especially from, well, these three words are ways to describe the ladder. It's a perception, so you perceive something. It's a stereotype. It's rhetoric. And in South Africa, we hear three labels that is under the banner of rhetoric, inequality, poverty, and unemployment. And what we've been doing in the last session is we've been unpacking poverty, because poverty is such a big, all-encompassing concept. And if you don't know how to solve something, we also looked at the whole world of systems theory, cybernetics, which says that everything is interrelated. Everything is hierarchical, and if you want to solve a problem, you need sufficient diversity in your control structures. You can't take 7 dogs on a walk with 6 leashes. You're going to lose one of the dogs. So tonight we'll quickly look at inequality. So why, I mean, one hears this point about inequality, and it's most definitely busy increasing in the whole world, not only in South Africa. So why does it concern us? Well, at some point, this is an article that came from the Financial Times. So even the Financial Times is writing about it. At some point, it starts creating economic ills. Even Oxfam, the British, one of the British key philanthropy organizations, they had a report a few years ago which said, solve extreme inequality and do it quickly. Okay. So one of the other, so why is it important that people have trust in the future? Because this essentially is what gets carried away if we do not manage to have a consensus, or at least alignment. The consensus is quite expensive, but alignment or congruence on common goals. What happens if we don't have it? Well, I talk about the robber. So if the robber steals trust in each other, it means everybody for himself. And you know that what the saying says is, and the devil for the rest. If you steal trust, then you don't trust the legal system. So, and if you can't trust the legal system, then the small person cannot get on with his life, because sooner or later somebody else is going to take it away from him. And we lose trust in the future. And if you don't trust the future, then you're not prepared to make an investment in some sacrifice today. The sacrifice is just a synonym for investment. So the implication of stealing trust is the single biggest risk to us as a collective in South Africa. So we unpacked poverty a little bit. There was the view of Maslow, but the view that we looked at was developed by an economist to try to understand why the people on top of the Andes mountain and the people in the capital of Chile are both happy, and the people on the mountain have nothing and the people in the capital have everything. So he devised these 9 needs, and the way that you satisfy them is the culture that you develop, the way we do things. Now, what we looked at, and the way we do things, we can either have stuff, we can be denied stuff, we can be doing things, and we can be interacting with our environment. And last time we looked at these 9 primary needs, and we looked at what happens if they are denied, if you are denied these needs. Now, remember, a business starts with satisfying people's needs. So here is a very rich bouquet of ways to look at poverty. Because remember, poverty, people don't want to be poor, they want to be rich. They want to be rich in idle time, in creativity, in identity. So here are 9 different ways of which we typically just think of existence in terms of a market, local market, that you can address some of the needs. So last time we looked at what was denied. Let's look tonight at what do we have. So this is the normal one: food, shelter, job is you exist. But look here at protection. It's not only social security. And in South Africa, we have quite a story. With social grants and child grants and old age grants and disability grants. South Africa's social security system is actually extremely well developed. But being healthy, having rights, having a family, protecting your family, having a job, all part of protection, satisfying the need for protection. Care, the need for care, able to have friends, family, relationship with nature, to understand, to have books, teachers, schools, and communication. So if there's a censorship in the society, then you're denying people their need to understand. Participation, putting sanctions on people. So participating is giving people responsibilities. So excluding a part of the population from taking a responsibility is you are denying them their need of participation. You also may be denying them their contribution to the economy. Assignments, giving people an assignment to do, giving them a job, giving them rights and privileges. Idle time, games, parties, events. So you can see there's lots of entertainment. The whole entertainment system, entertainment economy is geared towards satisfying this need of people want to have fun while they are resting. Creativity, skills, work, ability, methods, techniques. So people want to express themselves. Identity, symbols, not symbols. Language, religion, values, work, traditions, which no, another spelling mistake. Norms, habits, history, memory. So these are all things that people do with which they can satisfy their need to be somebody, to be recognized. One of the most fundamental needs of people is to be recognized. And then, of course, the question of freedom. So now poverty is not such a daunting problem. You can actually take any one of these 9 or any combination of them and say, but I can do something about this. I can make sure that the teenagers or the young adults in my community get a chance to get involved in something. So what we looked at last week was denial. What happens if you don't get your needs satisfied? So what is the conclusion at this point? Well, we all have the same needs. Whether we live on the top of the mountain or live in the capital. Culture, the way we do things, are the different ways in which we address the needs. Okay? If your recipe for carrot cake, for example, is successful, then and it is passed on to your next generation, it can become heritage. And the heritage of tomorrow is our future. Okay, and then we started to look at the concept of time scale of processes. Okay, I sent a few questions to Dumisani, which he can. I sent a few questions to Dumisani from the next section in Wired for Business. I just need to slip out quickly. So you can, in the meantime, look at those questions. Dumisani, you can distribute it to everybody and answer the questions in the next 5 minutes, please. Okay, then we'll continue. Okay, hello, I'm back. Everybody still there?
We're still
Yes.
here, Prof.
Okay, great, great. Thank you for allowing me for the small break. Okay, so then what we ended with the last lecture was on the system side is the key processes in society. So we talked about the value add process, which is about going about life, going to school, going to work, putting bread on your table. That's the value added process. But you can only do that if somebody else before you decided to build a water supply system, a sewage farm, a school, a clinic, a hospital, a shopping center. So there's the strategic process where you can actually deliver something that you can measure and you can manage the contract to with the outcome of getting exactly what you need. If you want to build a power station with 140 megawatts of power, you can actually build, specify, contract, and build such a power station. Then we look at the normative processes. Now, this one, you can't say exactly what you want. You can just say, I want a constitution, or I want restitution, or I want reconciliation. But you cannot specify how much reconciliation you want. So it's a process, and we'll delve into the detail of this tonight as well. And around that is your spiritual process. You are born as a person, as a creation of God, and there's a relationship with yourself and God over the period of time. Okay. Now, what we're going to do now is to delve into 4 chapters in value add process, and then we're going to come back and reflect on what does the strategic process mean, what does the normative process mean, and what can I do about it? Sure. Many of you. Okay.
Go to John chapter 15, that's one.
Okay, so now we go back to Wired for Business. So this is the value add process block, and we are going to look at what's happening here. So in section 1 and section 2, we looked at what do you think you can do that is at hand, a need that you can address in society, and we looked at how do you get the finance to actually, or the resources to actually satisfy that need. And the whole point about going into unpacking poverty, one level of abstraction in more detail than what is presented in the popular media, is that in addressing poverty, there are many building blocks that one can take on and turn it around and decide, what can I do about it? Do I have a passion to solve this problem? Do I have the resources to implement what my passion is? So today we are going to do 4 chapters. The first one is on capital, and we started touching on the fact that that what you need in chapter 2, what you need is wisdom, and maybe capital comes after that, because then you have the wisdom how to apply capital. So we're going to look more at capital. Chapter 4 is going to look at some business terms, some language, there's vocabulary that's attached to this whole thing. Chapter 5, number 1 priority is sales, because that's a way to get capital, get somebody to pay you, to deliver something, pay in advance, deliver later. And of course, closing the sale is the topic, the topic of chapter 6. Okay, so coming back to, so this course goes to quite a bit of effort to talk you out of getting capital, because getting capital makes you a slave to whoever provided you with the capital. And it's better to be free. Remember one of those 9 needs, basic needs of people. If you accept capital, then you definitely give up your freedom. Okay. So here's typically an argument. And in fact, I told you about the young man last time that I bumped into, and he said he's into coffee and logistics. And I asked him about his coffee business because I need a coffee supplier. And he said, well, he's waiting for 50,000 Rand from the NYDA. Well, maybe he gets it, maybe he doesn't get it, but in the meantime, he's not in business. So to survive, if you need cash to survive, it's still not a reason to borrow money to run a business. So it means your cash flow is poorly managed, is bad, and of love, hope, and faith, cash flow is the most important. Okay. So when do we need capital? Well, when you have an established business that is making a profit on a monthly basis, okay, and you want to grow. So let's say you have a guest house with 6 rooms. Your occupancy rate on your guest house is 80%, and you would like to expand to 10 rooms or 12 rooms. Let's say you double your guest house, or you just add 2 rooms, doesn't matter. So you know that you have clients, you know that you can manage the guest house to 80% occupancy, and now you need capital to add 2 more rooms to buy assets that will generate income. Okay, so then it's a good time to get capital. Okay, so once you have recurring revenue and you are making a recurring profit every month, then you can use whatever is the balance of your recurring revenue. Let's say you are earning 20,000 Rand a month and you have 5,000 Rand net profit, then you can borrow to the extent that you can repay whatever you are borrowing with 5,000 Rand a month. And at current interest rates, how much is that? So 10,000 Rand can borrow you 1 million Rand. So 5,000 Rand you can borrow 500,000 Rand, which is actually quite a lot. So how do you get capital? Well, the first prize is in fact to sell something to a customer that they pay for upfront, and then you use their money to build whatever you're delivering or to provide the service. So you've got positive cash flow is the concept that's behind it. There are some video clips in this video, but let's rather go on. I can copy these links to the video clips for you to send it to Dumisani, and then he can distribute it to you if you want to watch the videos. Okay, so how then do I get capital now? So there, in Proverbs, is there some wisdom? She looks at land and buys it, and with money she has earned, she plants a vineyard. Okay. So some people think that if you have more, I will have less, but that's not true. Okay? fair trade and hard work multiplies goods available. There's no blockage for everyone in this audience to have a good idea in parallel to everyone else. Instead of demanding the right to a product, honest business creates value for both parties. So all 19 people on this call can actually benefit from being in some kind of multilateral service that we provide for each other. So as business people, you can't demand stuff. You have resources, time, knowledge, know-how, and you can trade with it. Okay? So if it is taken unethically for whatever wrong reason, so it is because we did not trade it, then you create an imbalance in the relationship between two parties. Okay. So the understanding the value of trading for what you have, for what you want. There was a study done of the tribes living in the Amazon forest who are quite remote from each other. I haven't seen the material, so I'm just talking from hearsay, but what they say is that the tribes or the collectives of people that started trading, that survived extinction, are the people that started trading with their communities of people around them. Okay, so here's some homework. These are the questions I sent you now via WhatsApp. And this is essentially the basis of a business plan. What am I going to sell? Who's going to buy it? Where and how can I make it available? How do I grow the business? How much money do I need to start it? And how can I get this money? Okay, and here's the case for wisdom again. If you don't know, ask God and be still about it. Okay. Inspiration, here's a lady that started life with 3 pregnant pigs in 2015. So she knew how to work with pigs, she knew how to raise them. And then she started with 3 pregnant pigs, and she, of course, the interesting thing about farming with animals is that you essentially get almost 100% return on investment every year when they have their offspring. And there's even some farmers in the Free State who are farming with sheep, and they've down selected the ewes, the mothers, sheep mothers, to a point where they mostly have twins. So they in fact have 150 to 180% return on investment every year. So farming is with something like pigs or cows or sheep is actually can be a very lucrative thing. Okay, so today she's got 100 pigs, and it takes over 100 days for a piglet to grow into a pig. So it means that the pigs can give you 3 times, 300% return on investment every year. Can you believe it? Okay. Okay, so here's a quiz you can do for yourself if you have experience and you need to borrow cash to survive from month to month. Is it acceptable to get a loan, true or false? If really needed, we should only get capital if we are established in business, knowledgeable and wise. Okay, right? So lots of generalization here in all the words. But let's for a moment assume that is true. Sales have the following benefit for my business. It helps me to contact people. It makes the cash register ring. So that's the right answer. selling stuff generates capital. Yes, of course, it generates operational capital, working capital. If I trade stuff and don't make money, this one is different. Because you could have traded for something else that does not have to be money. I need to trade with what I have for what I want. And that equation, that number 6, essentially is the heart of economics. You have something of which you have an abundance, and somebody else needs what you have in abundance, and somebody else have another abundance, and you want what they have, and then you can exchange the good or the service or whatever the case may be. And this is as simple as economics is. Money is just a way to temporarily store it, because if you want eggs, and somebody else is selling pigs. Let's say you're selling eggs and somebody else is selling pigs, then your eggs, people can buy your eggs for money, and you store the value intermediately until you are in a position to buy a pig or you need a pig. So money is it's supposed to be just a place how to store money. Okay, some vocabulary. So fixed costs. So this is things that there's very little that you can do about it. So for example, if you're renting a place, it's going to cost you 1,000 Rand a month. Or if you rent a desk in a work share environment. So variable cost varies with the number of let's say you are baking something, then you need to buy flour to bake something to sell your cake. So if you're not baking anything, you don't need any variable cost. So cost of sale essentially is just a synonym for variable cost. So if you're selling something, then whatever your variable cost is accounted for under cost of sale. Cash flow. Now this is the bliksem. Right? So that is the net result after selling something, using cash to build it or to provide the service. Then you receive payment for the service that you provided, and the rest of that is profit. But you may only receive your payment next month. So that means that this month your cash flow is negative because you're only receiving your payment for what you're doing next month. And that's why it's important to get people to pay upfront so that you have the capital, working capital available as provided by your customer instead of having to go to the bank for working capital. Debtors are the good people. They're the people that owe you money. Creditors are the people that you owe money to. And turnover is a total sales generated over the specific period. So maybe we should next time just look at a typical, it's called an income statement. So there's a language which the accounting community in the world and in South Africa is the same thing. There's a language which they agree on, and the standard by which they implement the language so that South Africa's revenue services can make their assessment on what to tax, and of course give the shareholders and other stakeholders a common benchmark with which they can compare different companies. So, and that's the whole world of financial, it's called financial statements. There's a whole industry to make sure that all the financial information in financial statements are comparable with each other across companies, across industries, and everything else. Okay, any questions at this time or comments? Okay. So in terms of time planning, in the last session, it was clear that 1 hour is too little and 2 hours is maybe too much. So we are going to carry on until 9:15, 9:15, and then we have 15 minutes to discuss and make other points and everything else. Okay, so here's a big question. What's more important, cash flow or profit? What would you say?
Cash flow.
Cash flow.
Cash flow. Okay,
Yes, cash flow.
cash flow.
Positive cash flow.
Okay,
Cash
positive
flow.
cash.
Cash flow.
Yeah, so cash flow, positive cash flow is certainly first prize. Okay. Okay, cash flow explained. So let's look at cash flow. So in an engineering business, so let's talk about an engineering project. And I'm not suggesting that engineering projects is a good way to build a business. But let's say there's a project that requires 20 man years, or 20, let's make it easy, 24 man years over a period of 12 months. So you have a team of 20 of 2 engineers. So man years. So you need 24 engineers. And you have a 12-month period for the project. Let's say we're developing building a small satellite for Sansa. So when is Sansa going to pay us? They're going to pay us after the 12 months, after we have delivered the satellite. So and maybe it's even 30 days after we have delivered the satellite. So now, these engineers, these 24 engineers, we need to pay them every month for 12 months before we get paid. Okay? So what does 24 engineers cost per month? Let's say they're 50,000 Rand a month. And this is now a balanced and average salary between experienced engineers and less experienced engineers. So our expenses are 24 times 50,000 per month. Okay, so that equals to 1.2 million Rand per month. And for how many months do we need to do this?
So it's 13 months.
Apologies, I'm on duty tonight, working for my wife. So, so this is what so we're talking about, we're talking about engineering. So let me not show you the guest house. Okay, so we were busy 1.2 times 13. How much is that, Dan? 15.6 million rand. So we need to spend 15.6 million rand before we get paid. Yeah. Does that sound like a simple business? How much profit do we need to make this a viable business? You would think. What is our price? What is our selling price that we need to have? I would argue we need at least 30 million rand selling price.
I'm Sansa, I can't comment.
Okay, I'll use a different example next time then. Yeah. Because now you need to borrow the money, the 15 million rand. You have to pay interest on it, cumulatively over the 13 months. You have to pay because you have to pay the engineers, and then you have to pay the rent and the water and lights and the marketing and whatever. So this is quite a tough cash flow problem, right? To manage this. So you need somebody that's prepared to. So you need to be really sure that you can deliver the product, for one, and that you will be paid once you have delivered the product. Really strong trust fabric that's required. Okay, so here's a point about how much cash flow should a business have. Okay, so I've now explained to you quite an extreme situation. So if you spend $1,000 a month on average, then you need to have $3,000 in your cash flow reserve so that you can manage 3 months of non-payment. So we gave you an extreme example now of 12 months of executing the contract. And the hard point about these cash reserve is it must never be touched. So put it safely away in a 30-day deposit, notice deposit, so that it takes you 30 days to get it out of it. Okay, so are we guaranteed success in business? No, there's no guarantee. But God says there are certain principles which we can put in place and okay, sorry, I have no idea what happened there, but my network just disappeared.
I think you will need Mbongeni to supply you with some fiber connection or something.
I say no. Well, this is the fiber network. Huh? I have a fiber network and ADSL network.
Oh la la. Okay.
So we're now on the ADSL network.
Okay, cool.
Now, fiber is not the solution to problems. Okay, so the point about this is that it's not about the resources. Of course, the resources help if you have them, but it's really about applying your imagination and asking for God's wisdom. Okay, so here's some good advice. Ask God for wisdom every day. Share your plans with him. Proverbs 16.3 is a very famous verse. And having good advisors. So get people that understand, that you trust, and that have experience. There's even a verse in Proverbs. Plans go wrong for lack of advice. Many advisors bring success. So you can insist on making your own mistakes. That's fine, but maybe there's help in a different way. Okay, here's another success story. I will copy this link to you to Demisani to distribute with you. Okay, so we're going to run out of time, so I'm just going to go to the next chapter. Chapter 5, sales. If you can sell, you will always make money. Sales is a learned skill that can and must be practiced. I have an engineer who worked on Sunset, I don't know, 25 years ago, and he joined a company which are building cameras. And when I was traveling in the world, I saw him in all the right places, and some of those places are quite difficult to figure out. And so I asked him, so how on earth are you always in the right place at the right time? And he said, well, he maps out all the supply chain of the space industry. They make cameras, and then he identifies exactly who will be his potential customers, where are they going to be, and he just turns up there. So it's a skill that you can learn, and he's a very quiet engineer. He's not a talkative gentleman. If you cannot sell your business will not grow. Customers buy things that they need, not what you want to sell. So if your product speaks for itself, it addresses a need, then it will be sold. Remember those needs, those 9 basic needs of people, those kinds of things. Okay, create the need, sell to the need. So in a drought, people will look for water tanks, so sell water tanks. Okay, and there's a story about that, where you can sell your water tank to a car wash business because they will actually be able to carry on doing their business even if there's a drought. During lockdown, people still needed food, and in South Africa, you needed a permit if you were an informal trader. So the short answer is get a permit. Hustle, grab opportunities, look for opportunities every day. Sales presentation. In every sales presentation, the benefit. So why are you selling it? So these shirts, but people can buy shirts from anywhere, are made of good, strong cotton. Maybe Egyptian Oxford cotton is a very strong weave. So they will really last a long time, good value for money. So you won't have to buy in a hurry. So maybe your shirt is a little bit more expensive. And then throw in a success story so that people can see there's evidence of using your service or product. Now it's quite interesting if you go and buy something in somewhere else. listen carefully how the person tries to sell you something, because you can actually learn quite a lot from that. Some worldview wisdom, John 14:21. Yeah. John 14:23. Okay, so that's all about God being with us, really with us. We must just communicate with him. Okay, homework. Well, practice on somebody using the principles above. But if you're not reading the Bible yet, maybe it's a good start. So here's another success video. I will send this video link also to you, to Dumisani, to distribute. Some of these stories are actually quite amazing. Yeah, so here's a guy that got 50 cents to go and he could buy a bread, or in this case, he bought a tin of polish and started providing a service, and then moved on from shoes to the car's tires, and of course, a guy that is, or a lady that is really into cars. The car must look good, and of course, you can charge much more. And that was his business. So it grew into enough money to go to buy a house and to change his world, his life. So for every fact, there must be a benefit. Every property that every characteristic that your product or service has, there must be a benefit. A benefit is a reason to buy the product. Success story shows evidence that your product is of good quality and that you are not reliable. No, that's definitely not true. So God loves me and manages me from a distance, or God loves me and wants to speak to me about the details. Well, that is to speak to us about the details. Okay, I think we're going to stop with chapter 5 tonight from Wired for Business, and go back to and see how we can change the context in which we are operating. Okay, so the last time we looked at the last time we were here. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so last time we looked at these 4 processes which run in parallel, and I argue that there's a 5th process here at the bottom which says that people who are in a desperate situation need to be looked after as well. Not everybody has the tools or the skills to be looking after themselves every day. So that's why there are social support systems. So these 5 processes, social support, adding value, strategic, normative, spiritual, run in parallel every day. Although for the most part, we just focus on value added every day, most of the time. Okay, so let's unpack the 4 processes a little bit more. So the value add domain is also called the operations domain. So this is where things happen. So this can be 1 day to 2 years. And here are the 4 characteristics of something that is produced. You can do 1 per day or 10 per hour. There's a cycle time. There's a volume. You can do 100 in a month. So you have 100 items to sell. There's a reference to quality. It's either a 2-star, a 3-star, or a 5-star guest house. And there's a price. And the way that this process is measured, whether it's going well or not, is profit and solvency. Okay, so solvency means that the pool of money in support of the business, in fact, so one could say the working capital, if you like, is positive and it is growing. It's not, if it's declining, then sooner or later you will run out of cash flow and then this business will stop. So that's the value add domain. So that's what we're busy with every day in our normal day-to-day life. Here's the strategic domain, the innovation management. So here it's about new value potential. If you build a new solar power plant, you can generate another. I saw there's a company that secured a number of 140 megawatt power plants across South Africa. In fact, 4 or 5 of them, in fact. So you can generate new power, but now the big question is it attractive? In other words, can you connect to Eskom's grid? Is it feasible? Can you afford to pay, I don't know, $1 billion? So I visited a wind farm the other day, and the wind farm was 1 billion rand for, I can't remember how many megawatts, but it was not a lot actually. So in that case, you need to borrow or you get invested a billion rand, and it takes about 8 to 12 years to pay that back. Is it transferable? Will people use your electricity? Can they get access to it? And how does it fit into the system? Is it wind power or is it coal power? Maybe coal power will not fit into the system anymore because nobody will provide the capital. So this is a 1 to 5 year view into the future. But if you don't build a power station, you can't get electricity in 5 years' time to operate your business. So this is where the big infrastructure investments sit. This is where mining houses, local municipalities, provincial authorities, national authorities, big shopping centers, data centers. This is all part of this domain. The next domain is the challenging domain. It's a normative domain. So this is the values by which we make decisions. It's more than 5 years. And the development feasibility is the criteria. So if we develop a constitution and we published the constitution and adopted it in 1996, can it be implemented over the next 10, 20 years? So it took 6 years to develop the constitution, and its implementation time frame can be decades. So here, if you have a problem or an issue in a normative domain, here's a process with which you can take it on. You can solve if there's dissonance in a normative domain, such as, I don't want to come up with an example now. But so step 1 is you have to be able to sit in a meeting and listen to somebody. So this is what typically happens in Parliament. Listen to somebody that is completely different from your position. You have to be tolerant. The next element in the normative domain process is you have to be able to participate in dialectic debate. So this is talking to people sensibly who have completely opposing views to what you all have. The challenge is to become congruent with everybody in the room. Congruence, another word for it is alignment. So congruence is not about consensus. Congruency is about agreeing about the common outcome that is in the best interest of the country. Now in South Africa, you can think there are many issues that requires congruency. In fact, I think this process has been neglected in the last 15 to 20 years. In the 90s, it was the golden time for writing constitutions and designing national anthems, designing flags and things like that. But from 2000 onwards, we benefited from all that normative work in the 90s. Ek kan half 10 by jou wees.
Ek gaan nou met jou praat.
Nee, ek is half 10 by jou.
Asseblief daar BNB. Sias, ek wil nou met jou praat.
Ek kan nou met my praat. Okay, and then the final step in this process is to have achieved alignment or congruence, is to generate a new language with which one can solve the problem. Okay, now you can see this new language is really important as a new language because you can now, going back to the ladder of inference, any of the old words will trigger a stereotype in somebody in the room, and that stereotype will immediately switch on the filter, and now the person cannot see the future anymore. Okay, so this is why this generative phase of this process needs a new language, because a new language will not trigger any of the old thoughts that will stop people from being constructive. Okay, so this is the process. This is the content of each of the domains. If we open up for questions or comments or insights, the floor is open.
How do you structure that satellite building contract such that you don't get paid after 13 months, Prof, and you get paid every month?
I think my follow-up question to that one of Dan is, it means one must have unshakable faith and trust also in the contractor themselves or the project, the project owner, that they would definitely come through after having such a big loan that you would have to get while you're waiting for payment after 13 months. Yeah. It's just a thought, not that you should comment, but just a
Okay,
thought.
so that's a no, that's a so it's all of the above, né? So step one is to so if you, let's simplify it a little bit. Let's say you needed to borrow the 15 million for the whole period at 10%. Okay, so it's maybe a different, it's not 15 million over the whole period, it's not necessarily 10%, maybe it's 15% incrementally over the period, but let's just make it simple for the now. So that means that your financing cost is 1.5 million rand. So if you can convince your customer to pay 2.5 million rand upfront every 2 months for the period, and then So that's 6 payments of 2.5 million. And then after you have delivered, so they pay the balance of the contract, the 15 million. Okay, remember the price is 30 million. So they essentially pay the 15 million in 6 installments, 2 months in advance. And once the satellite is delivered and they are happy with it, then they pay you the final balance of 15 million rand. So did you have to go and borrow any money? No, because you manage the project cash flow positively.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so you need to, so the client needs to understand that it's important for him or her that you are in a good cash flow positive position. And of course, as in return for him paying you in a cash flow positive way, you can give him a 1.5 million rand discount without losing any money. Okay, so that's how you would do it.
Oh, cool. And would this be too large a scale of business for you to do 50% upfront and do the work and then do the 6 months payment towards the end? No?
So who will give you 50% upfront and trust that you will deliver and only come to measure you 12 months later? Remember, your factory can be washed away because of floods.
Yeah.
You can meet the love of your life and go to Thailand for 12 months. I mean, many things happen. So it's a dual. So you need to prove every 2 months or that you are on track, and because you are on track, then you get the money for the next 2 months.
Okay, that's fair. Interesting.
Okay. Yeah, and of course, how it's, yeah. So who is going to employ 24 engineers? Because 24 engineers, you can't just switch them on and off.
Yeah.
You must have planned to pay them for at least, if they can't see a 5 to 10 year horizon for being employed or being paid on a monthly basis, they will rather choose somewhere where they can see that. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Of course, Prof, capital intensive projects like that, yeah, they do have a barrier to entry for a guy who's starting at a very low base. So ideally, we would look for positive cash flowing businesses that you bring in more per month than goes out. I mean, the engineers, they are black holes, aren't they? And so each one of them is sucking. Ideally.
I hear a gentleman speak who can only see circles.
Your view is limited.
I hate risk. I hate risk because if there's one thing that kills all businesses and human endeavors, it's risk. Now, every expense is a risk. The bigger the expense, the bigger the risk. And engineers don't come cheap. And they can also get better offers in the middle of that contract. And now your capacity to deliver that contract is compromised. I hate the risk for that reason, because now I'm going to fail, not because, all because of the inherent risks of business and the nature of the business I'm involved in.
Yeah, so you must charge enough for the product. You must, the work must be interesting in its own right. Yeah, so it's a fine balance. It's a fine balance.
Okay, can I ask something now? Suppose we would want to build a satellite. And now, because we want to build a satellite, so because there's this customer who wants us to build it for him or her, but now he would not, there's a tender out there, but they will not want to give to people without experience. They always say that they need a track record, that you have done a similar job for 2 or for 3 to 5 companies, different projects, track record. So in our case, how would we get to the stage of being able to be given such a project? How do we develop ourselves to be trusted with such a big job? Don't know if I'm clear.
You are crystal clear. So
Thank you.
it is, so one must be able to see that somewhere in the future, such a contract will be made available through an RFP. Now, how can one see the future? So there are many trends which one can follow, many things happening that one can follow and say, okay, so if this process is carrying on, then sooner or later there will be an RFP for a satellite. So in the case of renewable energy, it's actually quite simple. South Africa seems to need still another 4,000 megawatt generating power, if not more, like 16,000 megawatt generation power. So you can plot out and say, okay, so at this point in time, we're most likely going to order 2,000 and then another 2,000 and another 2,000. So you can actually plan very well and start looking for a site to put up your towers or your solar panels. So in the case of and if you think that people need, you can also see in the renewable domain, you can see that people need storage for the electricity overnight. So you can start looking at battery technology, and one can be quite certain for the next 20 years, battery technology is going to be interesting. Supplying battery storage for electricity is going to be interesting. That's a reasonable, simple trend to spot and to prepare yourself in one aspect of that supply chain that is interesting to you.
Okay.
And that's the heart of the answer, is to see the future and then to figure out in the future, let's say the future is a satellite for South Africa. Try to predict when that is going to be, and of course that is really tough, a tough way to think about the future. And then look at the whole supply chain and decide which element of the supply chain you have a competitive advantage in. Because building a satellite has got many parts to it. And if you want to build all those parts, then you better be a state-owned enterprise. And if you look at South Africa, that's also no guarantee that you will get anything right. Choose one aspect of the supply chain and then focus on establishing that capability, and preferably you supplying whatever you're supplying to other industries as well. Okay. So
Yes,
that's how what one would take it on.
okay.
Okay. And they talk about it. They talk about a niche, and a niche is something that is big enough for you to manage, but small enough to be not interesting to another company. Okay, thank you so much. Next week is our fourth session, final session. I think if you send your questions to Dumisani, he'll pass it on to me, and then I can prepare a quite dedicated address to your questions. Okay. Thank you for your time. And see you
Fabulous,
again.
fabulous.
If it goes well, see
Thank
you
you.
next.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Okay, good night.
Right.
Bye.
Good night, Prof.
Good night.